We're back with another episode of Sox Talk with Will Middlebrooks, our final episode of the season. And Will, I gotta admit to you, I was gonna go all out for this episode. I was going to buy a Will Middlebrooks Red Sox jersey for this one. I
Good
searched
luck
high and
finding
low
it.
for it. I wanted the your rookie season number 64 jersey. I asked all my buddies about it. I looked online. I found it. Couldn't pull the trigger on it. I totally forgot about it. Spaced on it. But maybe next season. Maybe that's a next season thing. I get the Will Middlebrooks 64
Right.
on the
I
back.
could probably
instead
dig
of
up one
60.
you can lease. I'm not giving it away, but you can lease it.
I like that. I'll wear it on the front too. Yeah, I'll put Middlebrooks on the front instead of Red Sox on the front.
Yeah, there you go.
But like I said, this is going to be our final episode of Sox Talk with Will Middlebrooks. We're going to dive into today's episode what the Red Sox need to do this offseason. A very important offseason for them after kind of an underwhelming finish to the season, the second half of the season. Of course, didn't go the way they wanted to. I guess, Will, just to kind of get into it, when you're looking at the Red Sox as, we get into, end of October into November, these hot stove months, what do you see as kind of their biggest needs? What do they need to kind of accomplish this offseason, moving forward? So next season they're playing baseball in October.
Well, I think something we've seen over the last few years is that they just kind of fall off a cliff. August, September, they don't play good baseball, which playoff teams should never be able to play terrible baseball the last 2 months and get in. So you got to find a way to somehow stretch out your talent, right? It's like get guys to get to the finish line. And I think a lot of that is going to, you got to add an ace. There's no way around it anymore. This is something we've been talking about, like, oh, hopefully. No, this is the off season where you're aggressive. I think it's time to start worrying about the now more than the future. And Craig Breslow's made some comments to TC on 310 to left recently about how it's time to start paying more attention to the now, and that he made a really good point of you can't keep asking this fan base to sit back and wait for the future to get here for you to go out and win the division, because I think the position player talent is here. I think there's a lot of young talent. I think the full core is just about here with a couple of guys that finished in AAA that are going to contribute in 2025. So I think it's time that they build around that. First things first, an ace. You can trade for a guy like Garrett Crochet. I think they have the prospect capital. I think they have some proven first, second year big leaguers that they can somehow build a trade to get a guy like that. Look, Craig Breslow is not as attached to these prospects as Chaim Bloom was.
Yeah.
He didn't draft
he
them.
showed
He
that
didn't
at the
develop
trade
them.
deadline, right?
Right. So it's time, and I'm optimistic but cautiously, right? Because I don't look. I'm a part of this organization. I'm a broadcaster and an analyst for the team, but I'm also a fan of this team and a fan of this organization, and that's why I came back to work here, because I love it and I want them to win. This isn't just a job for me. I actually care about the team winning. So cautiously optimistic. I'm looking at like Garrett Crochet for like a trade, but then there's free agents out there, the Max Frieds, the Jack Flaherty's, Corbin Burns. Corbin Burns is probably going to cost a lot more than I think this team is willing to pay when they have other holes to fill, which we can get to that down the line and talk about the bullpen a little bit. But when I'm looking at the rotation for 2025, I think you can acquire an ace. I think Tanner Houck is a proven number 2 at this point after last season. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, definitely.
We keep forgetting Lucas Giolito is going to likely be a big part of this team next year in the third spot. And then I would go Bayo, and I think Crawford is a very reliable number 5.
Definitely.
He eats innings. He will have outings where he shoves and puts the team on his back, but he's probably going to have a 4. And that's totally fine in your 5 spot of a guy who's giving you at least 150 innings.
He's kind of like a streaky pitcher, right? He'll have a month where he's
Exactly, which that's a number 5, right? Because if he wasn't streaky and he was good all the time, he'd be an ace. So
exactly.
Look, and honestly, it's like I think they have developed some rotational depth that the team wasn't really sure if they had much of. Quinn Priester comes in. in the Nick York trade from Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
Richard Fitz is here. He kind of got to the big leagues and showed he could
yeah,
probably contribute.
1.74 ERA and four
Yeah.
starts or something like that.
Zach Penrod threw out of the bullpen. I think he could also be a starter. Cooper Criswell was a big part. These are all like number sixes. Now, number
Yeah.
sixes are important to your organization because never do you go through the year of guys not having to miss starts, not having injuries here and there, and you need guys to fill in. And if those are the guys that can be your number six and sevens and eights and fill in double headers and things like that, guys get hurt and they can be long guys out of the pen. I think those are some names to keep an eye on because depth does matter. And some guys will continue to develop within the system, which is good because there's a lot of prospect talent in our system, but it's position players. So keep an eye on the development of pitchers at the higher minors levels because those guys are going to need to contribute over the next couple of years.
So it seems like you're really circling that starting rotation, red pen, circling, highlighting it. You mentioned Crochet, which they would obviously have to trade for. There are some nice arms out on that are going to be out on the free agent market this off season. I was wondering, well, what about a guy like Shane Bieber coming off of Tommy John surgery? Cy Young Award winner in the shortened 2020 season.
Right.
We've seen them kind of go after guys before coming off of a major injury that they feel like still have
I
stuff left in the
I
tank.
don't love the Bieber addition there. I
Biebs guy.
I don't think he's going to be fully ready till like midway through the season.
He had surgery in April, so I mean, everybody does bounces back
They're
from
not back
TJ
in a
differently,
year.
right?
We're looking at 16 months realistically, and we're looking at middle of the season. And if you're trying to win the division, you can't not have a number one.
Okay.
That's so I love Bieber. I love his stuff. But in that same breath of, yeah, like he might miss the first 2 months. Also, the first year back from Tommy John, it's not the stuff that guys are lacking. The velocity normally ticks up. It's the command. You even saw that from like Shohei the first year he came off Tommy John. He walked a ton of people. He could still strike out the house, but the command is the last thing to come. And that's something I was hoping Hendricks would get to log some innings this year, which he did in AAA, which was good to get in game action. So hopefully he's able to shake that off before the season starts next year. He had a full off season, which is nice, a normal off season. So hopefully that won't be an issue with him. It's more the starting pitchers coming off of Tommy John. Command always seems to be an issue in that first season returning.
Gotcha. Well, how about a guy like Max Fried, been with Atlanta? I feel like when you look at the rotation, right, the thing that was missing this year that they traded away to Atlanta was a lefty, right? It feels like they need a lefty to just kind of mix it up in the rotation. Who knows, what Fried's asking price is? Probably going to be pretty high. All pitching's always a luxury. You're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Is that a guy that you can see that they could lure? Is that a guy that you would even want them to be in consideration?
I love Max Fried. I think his stuff is it still plays and it will for 2 or 3 more years at a high level. Um, I'm not totally bought into the whole you have to have a lefty because if his start day doesn't line up against the team that um, is full of guys that don't hit lefties well, then it doesn't matter. And in today's game, the way rosters are built, even at the 26-man level in the big leagues, they're built to platoon and they're built to mix and match against lefties and righties. So normally you have guys in there that day who can at least have 5 or 6 guys who have success against left-handed pitching. So it's not a say all be all that you have to have left-handed starting pitching. It's great if it works out and it lines up perfect, but it's not always the case.
Gotcha. Let me throw one more pitcher at you because I know we've been talking about the starting rotation, but the bullpen was a big issue over the second half of the season. You feel like if they had at least average bullpen, they probably make it to that first round of the playoffs, with just all the blown saves that they had over since after the All-Star break. A guy that was kind of rumored to the Red Sox might be interested in him, maybe not during the trade deadline was Tanner Scott. He's
I
obviously
would love that.
would that be like the home run for you? The like, hey,
Oh,
they
for
get
the
this guy.
bullpen, absolutely. He's phenomenal. He was great in Miami. Obviously, he's in San Diego now, um, playing to go to the ALC or NLCS tonight in Game
Yeah.
5 against the Dodgers. So, um, he was probably the most important piece added to San Diego and to that bullpen that I think is best built for a postseason run. They added Jason Adam as well, and
Yep.
they have Suarez as their closer. But I thought Tanner Scott, he can give you anything from like a seventh inning leverage arm, or he can be a closer. So if you have
That
a
versatility is key now, right? That's what people are looking
100%
for.
flexibility, being able to pitch in different roles, especially once the postseason gets here. Um, I'm not getting ahead of myself with this Red Sox team for next year, but you get to important games in September. The Red Sox are playing important games in August this year, trying to stay alive. They played up until the last week of the season where games did matter. They weren't mathematically eliminated, but how many games did they blow where you're looking back saying, man, if they just played 500 baseball, had they not blown even half of those games in the second half, they would have had a chance at the postseason. They had a really good chance if they had not blown half of them. So the back end of the bullpen matters. Kinley was obviously on the way out. We don't have to get into that. I feel like he shut down there physically and mentally there at the end. Um, I would love to re-sign Chris Martin. You know, his veteran presence. I still think he has enough in the tank to be a maybe not an eighth inning guy anymore, but maybe seventh inning. But you're looking at interchangeable pieces between him, Justin Slayton, who is emerging as a really high leverage arm. Um, Zach Kelly, I think, is still going to play a big part in this. I know he's pretty early in his career, and he struggled at times with the long ball and giving up hard contact, but you can't teach stuff. And he has pure stuff, and he has 99 in his back pocket. He developed that really good sweeper that we saw at times was unhittable when he was throwing strikes and getting ahead of guys. And then obviously the changeups he's always had. So I think Zach Kelly, if he can hone in his mechanics, I'm sure that's going to be a big part of his offseason is finding a way to throw more strikes. Because when he gets strike one, I would love to see the difference in batting average against him or just results in at bats when he gets when he's 0-1 instead of 1-0. Because we saw him so many times 3-1, 2-0. And when you're in those situations in the big leagues and you're facing elite hitters, it doesn't matter how nasty your stuff is if they know a fastball is coming and or even if they're sitting off speed, they can sit middle of the plate because they know you have to throw a strike and it's
Yeah.
going to get hit. So he's got to fix his mechanics and get locked in because the stuff is really good. Now here's the kicker. Garrett Whitlock. We haven't talked about Garrett Whitlock.
We have not talked about. I was gonna bring him up to you today because when I heard, end of the season, I think you were on the broadcast in Tampa. All of a sudden, we haven't talked about Garrett Whitlock for months, and I hear you talking about Garrett Whitlock. My ears perked up, and you said, he's gonna be in the bullpen. I was
I
like,
think so.
"Ooh, does Will know something here?"
I don't. This is pure opinion on my part. Um, the best ability is availability. And he has not shown that he can stay healthy as a starting pitcher. I love him as a starting pitcher. I love his stuff. I think he is a big, strong kid that can be a horse, but you're either healthy and available or you're not. And when he got to the big leagues that first year and a half, he was so good.
So dominant.
So good in the bullpen and whatever role you wanted to put him in. Um, I just think that's a way to keep him healthy. I think it's a way to really tap into even better stuff when he's only needs to get 3 to 6 outs. And he doesn't have to say, okay, I need to try to throw 5, 6 innings here. I'm going to throw 90 to 100 pitches and I'm going to pitch at 94. Well, now he can pitch at 96. We'll see how he comes back off the injury, but
Yeah.
you got to expect a tick up in velocity if he's in the bullpen. And I think we've seen the stuff play and I trust that. So you start looking at a back end of if you re-sign Chris Martin, he's there. If you can sign a Tanner Scott, that would be phenomenal. But Justin Slayton, Liam Hendricks still has more in the tank. I think Zach Kelly is going to be important. What's going to happen with Winkowski? Winkowski's got like, is he a long guy? Does he go to AAA as one of those six
Yeah.
starter depth pieces? Is he maybe in a trade?
Yeah.
We start looking at trades that can be made for a Garrett Crochet or a big time starting pitcher. You're going to have to piece together a big package deal to get a Garrett Crochet. And do you start looking at the Tristan Casas of the world? Do you start looking of Wilyer Abreu, who has solidified himself as an elite defender and a very good hitter at the big league level from the left side? Um, I I don't really have interest in trading Tristan Casas, if we're being honest. I think he was hurt this year, right? He missed
Yeah.
98 games. You can say, oh, he's a 240 hitter. He missed 98 games. All right.
He's still what, 24, 25 years
He's
old?
so young. He's going to be 25 next year. He's 30 home run potential. He's 100 RBI potential. He's going to give you not great defense at first base. I think if he can just be average at first base, I would be happy.
Yeah, you take
The
that.
only way I would be considering moving Casas is if they have some type of guy that they're going to add to play third base, and their plan is to put Raffy at first, which I
And the
don't
guy
know
that
if that's
and
a
the
thing
yeah,
yet.
and the
But
guy
it's
they've been
it's a
linked to,
possibility, right?
yeah, they've been linked to Bregman, right? And there's
The only thing is
Jose.
Bregman looking for $200 million. He's
That's
31
probably
years
a
old. He's
check they don't want
31
to
years
write.
old. How are you going to pay this guy? Because I, it's not my money. I get that. It's not Craig Breslow's money. It's beyond that. But do you really want to sign one of those contracts where you're eating the last 3 years of it? Where
Yeah,
you're the year 37, 38, 39 of his how old he is in that contract, and what are you really getting from him? Is he going to be a good third baseman at that point when you have nowhere else to put him?
probably
No,
not.
no. So depending on the deal, I would love Bregman. I wouldn't want to overpay and overextend on years when you're going to be eating the back end of that.
Yeah. It's a tricky spot because you take like his championship pedigree. We're talking about a team that kind of still needs to learn how to win, right?
Yes.
And
Well,
they
and the
haven't done
connection
it.
with Cora, right? Like they've
Yeah,
won together too,
yeah,
So I would love him in the clubhouse. I would love him with that young group of guys. I would love him pushing everyone and making everyone better around him. I just don't know if the price tag matches with the years.
yeah,
I would go higher AAV for a shorter contract. But you don't need to be eating 20 a year at the back end of that
yeah.
or more. So, um, like I said, I would love to keep Casas. I just think there's a lot of untapped potential in there with the power, game changing
Definitely.
bat.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you
Um,
need that left-handed bat too in the
but
order.
if he's the make or break in the deal for Crochet, it was nice knowing you, Tristan. I hate I don't mean that in a
You
rude
just
way,
really
but
want that
like
ace that badly.
but this team needs an ace more than they need a first baseman. I think they can fit, and also there's not really any first baseman in the system, so there's no first base depth.
Yeah,
If Raffy is and also you can't look at every position and say, okay, we have to have like an all-star at every. That's not
that's not
realistic.
going to
So in some
happen.
positions, you're going to have less offense. Some guys you might have to say, okay, we're going to take this guy. He might just be a really good defender, and he's going to hit 220 with 15. Because that's part of what this defense the team has to do is get better defensively. Because how many games did that cost them?
Yeah,
They somehow
definitely.
got worse this year than they were the year before. We were talking about this 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's
So they
been
they do
a
have
number of
to
years now.
they do have to, yes, offense is great, but how many errors and unearned runs cost this team, and back into the bullpen blowing games, did it cost this team? So there's your focus. Need an ace. I need to probably sign two solid arms in the back end of the bullpen. One of those can be Chris Martin. I would love Tanner Scott, but this is a wish list for Santa at this point.
Give us
Uh,
Tanner Scott, baby. Come on, give us Tanner
I would
Scott.
love that. And there is a power lefty. He can go back into the bullpen. And then somehow your defense has got to get better. And a lot of those guys are already on this team. It's the infield. The outfield was very good.
Yeah.
The
I
outfield
mean,
defense was
Abreu surprised
arguably the
everybody.
best in baseball. When
Yeah.
you're looking at defensive run saves and outs above average, this was arguably one of the best defensive outfields in the game. So
Absolutely.
the infield was a disaster.
I mean, speaking about the infield, they have that, hole at second base, and the debate's already kind of begun about
Yes.
what you do because it feels like ever since Dustin Pedroia left this organization, that it's just been a black hole at second base. They trade this past offseason for Vaughn Grissom. He has hamstring injuries, and they keep him at AAA for a little bit. Then he comes up, doesn't really do too much, and then you have this meteoric rise of Christian Campbell, and that train is, full steam ahead, and he has seems like a lot of backers to at least compete for that starting job next season. how do you just kind of see second base, shaking out? Is it something where it's like, hey, it's time to play these kids and see what we got, even though, Campbell was just selected, what, 2023 draft in the fourth
Well,
fourth
well,
round?
that's the thing is Von Grisham's only like I think he's less than a year older than
Is
Christian
it?
Gable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We forget that because he was a high school sign and got to the big leagues at an early age. He got to the big leagues when Christian Campbell was like a senior in or last year at Georgia Tech, right? And
Yeah,
he's young, so I'm not ready to give up on Von Grisham, but I'm all for a healthy competition to see who wants it.
yeah,
And it's tough. Competition in spring training's tough too because guys are coming off the off season. They're trying to work on things. So spring training's not always a great indicator of what you're going to get in season when guys are like trying to win a job, but they're also trying to work on their craft. So some games you're like, what is this guy doing? Why is he not swinging? Why is he only swinging at this? So you're like, he's working on something. But that's
yeah,
tough when you go into camp. And I've been in that spot where you go in and you're trying to win a job. So working on things is kind of out of the question. You're like, I got to win a job. So I thought Von Grissom looked much better defensively when he came up. They worked on him with his arm action because you
yeah,
remember when he the beginning of the year when he's up, he was almost like shot putting the ball. It looked very
yeah.
uncomfortable to first base. When he came back up at the end of the year, he was throwing from low, mid, up. He worked on. I talked to Brian Abraham about it and the minor league coordinator, and
Yeah.
he basically said we worked on him throwing from all angles, and it looked much more fluid and smooth and comfortable. Because I
Well, he's
remember
got he's got
texting,
like he's got much
I
different.
text Brian, I was like, dude, did
Yeah.
you guys work with him on his throwing motion? He's like 100%. Like it wasn't necessarily the throwing motion, but it was being comfortable throwing from different arm slots, which you have to as a middle infielder.
And he's a
Um,
much bigger like middle infielder too. Like seeing him in the Red Sox locker room, like
he's
this guy,
like my height. He's like
yeah,
6'2", 6'3".
yeah, he's a big guy. Like
Um,
you imagine like Dustin Pedroia who was like 5'10", if
right,
that, right? And
right.
now he's you
Um,
see this guy, you're like, wow, this guy could play like third base, not second.
for sure. And you start looking at those options too if Costas somehow gets traded, right?
Yeah,
The Von Grishams and the Christian Campbell's also 6'3". He's a
yeah,
beast,
he's a
brother.
big guy.
I
Yeah.
walked past him in the hotel when he was there that last series of the year.
Okay.
He was there to accept his minor league player of the year within the organization. They were honoring those guys at Fenway
Yeah.
there that last series against Tampa. I walked past him and his family at Hotel Commonwealth. My God, man. This guy's built like an NFL receiver. And like you see him in a uniform, you're like, oh, he's a skinny guy. Because but baseball uniforms in the minor leagues fit a little loose. They're not
Yeah.
fitted like big league
No gun
uniforms.
shows there.
Brother, he is put together. He's put together. And like, who says one of those guys can't play third base if ultimately they make the decision to move Raffy to first base,
Yeah.
which I think is coming at some point. Like
Which,
I would love Raffy to stay at third and um, figure out the defense. Like it got better. The defense has gotten better, but it's still considered by the metrics below average. So metrics are one thing, eye test is another. I get that. But it matters. And he's either making the plays or he's not.
yeah.
And I think another thing when a third, so I played third and I played first, and I thought first base was much easier. It's kind of a
Okay.
mental break. Like you don't have to make a diving catch down the line by the umpire and then throw the ball 160 feet to first,
Yeah.
right? Like you just kind of tackle it, knock it down, either go tag the bag or flip it to the pitcher. The hardest thing is just like reversing your responsibilities from the other side of the diamond. Um, but I think he could stay healthier because it's not as much. I feel like playing first base wasn't as much stress on the body.
Okay.
Definitely wasn't on the mind.
Maybe that's the move
So
they look into.
he can also DH some too.
Yeah.
Like who we haven't even tapped into like Yoshida.
Oh man, we could go on and
Yeah,
on.
I know there's a lot of things like I would love to move Yoshida. I don't think he's a true DH. I think
Yeah,
you know
6 year contract's
the
not looking.
years well the first couple of years of that we're going you hear the other executives say that's an overpay and you're thinking
Yeah,
this guy can hit. I don't think so. He's
yeah.
playing okay left field and now all of a sudden he doesn't play any outfield. He's not healthy. The bat
Not hit for
is the
power.
bat at times when he came. I mean, in August and September, he wasn't bad. Like he was one
No,
of the more consistent bats when he came back. But he's not really a true DH, right? And if you're not going to hit for a ton of power, you better be able to have some speed and run the bases. And he's not a fast guy either. So it's one or
you're
the
telling
other, right?
everybody a
Like
lot
I
of
want
things he
doubles
doesn't
or
do
you to be
well
able to
right now.
score from first, or I want homers. And, you weren't really getting that. So I would love to move that contract. I just don't think it's going to happen unless you're eating half of it.
Yeah. Real quick, because I know we got to get out of here. Obviously the prospects are a big, talking point storyline for this organization, whether it's Christian Campbell, like we were talking about, Roman Anthony, Kyle Teal, Marcelo Meyer. Is there a timeline or a time in the season you would like to see most of those guys up with the team next year? Is it, hey, some of these guys should be with the team out of spring training, or you bring them up incrementally?
I mean, there's no one answer for all of them. It's
Yeah,
all based off of development. I think Marcelo Meyer needs more time in the minor leagues because he missed a lot of time with injuries the past couple years, and that's kind of the red flag on him to this point.
yep,
Um, which like you would love to include him in like if it's a big trade, because I feel like he slipped to like number 3 on the list. I think it's
yeah,
Roman Anthony and then Christian Campbell at 1 and 2, in my opinion. And then Kyle Till is, I don't know how much Kyle Till's bat's going to play in the big leagues. I think he can be an average hitter for a catcher.
yeah,
But I think his defense is what's going to carry him throughout
yeah.
his career.
I mean, yeah, we
Which
talked
this
about
team
that
needs.
earlier.
This team needs a defensive catcher. They don't have one. So Kyle Teal is not going to be on the big league team unless he's an everyday player. So these guys are not going to be up early in the year unless they're playing every day, because they're not going to stunt their growth. They're not going to stunt their development by having them come up and be bench players. What's the point in that when they're 21, 22 years old?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense,
It
right?
doesn't make sense. So if they're not going to play every day, if they're not playing 5 days a week, they need to be playing every day in AAA to continue to develop. So depending on what happens with trades this offseason, we could have some movement in the outfield as far as trades go. So that would mean Roman could have a chance at a camp depending on what happens. But there's still a kind of an overstock of outfielders, especially left-handed hitting outfielders. So we'll see. Obviously, the infield battle we just talked about, Christian Campbell, I think that's a real thing. Like at second base. I mean, he had a 997 OPS on the season. On the season, he played at 3 levels. Minor league player of the year, not just for the Red Sox, but all of baseball.
Yeah, all baseball. Yeah.
Okay, so this is real. It's not like, oh, he had a good year. He got everyone's attention across the baseball world.
Yeah.
That's not a fluke year. That was consistent for 6 months. He was healthy. He runs well. He plays above average defense. He's just an athlete, and he bangs. Like he hits gap to gap. He's flying around the base pass. He's just a ball player. And like I said, I saw him in person. He looks like a receiver. Like that doesn't mean anything when it comes to baseball, but it's just impressive to see the size and also see video of him moving the way he does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those prospects will still, whether they're up with the Red Sox or in AAA, they're still obviously a big part of this organization's future. But for the time being, that's going to do it for our last episode of Sox Talk with Will Middlebrooks. Will, I got to really thank you for taking time all season to talk with us. I don't think people realize, we started this back in April, phone calls. I think the first one we ever did, I kind of cornered you in an office in Watertown and just started throwing questions at you. So
I'm glad you did. This has been fun, and it's turning into a thing. So hopefully we keep it going for next year.
I would absolutely love that. And again, just very grateful for you. I feel like if you listen to this, you can learn so much from your insights, from being an ex-player and from being, around the team throughout the season. So again, big thank you to you, and big thanks to anybody who's watched, listened, read any of the stories that I've done off of this. It's been fun to do. And like Will said, hopefully we get this train going again next year. But that's going to do it. Will Middlebrooks, Greg Dudek. Let's see what the Red Sox do this offseason, Will.
All right. Cheers, guys. Thanks for everything.
PNC Bank, rooted in communities big and small.